about what bike bus is for you, because all those grown-ups, we have our own ideas, but really it's about what you want. It's really about what we can do for you. So it's really, really important that we're listening. Our next speaker is hard to introduce because I feel like you all have some ideas about him already. When I thought about what this means, is mostly that the internet is mostly terrible. And maybe that's just my bias, but I feel like whenever we look online, we get a lot of things washed into our timelines, into our algorithms, that make us angry, that make us sad, that make us despair about the state of the world. And every so often, there's something that's quite the opposite. There's that one gardening blog that makes me incredibly happy because they share minute updates about their rhubarb, and I'm here for it. And then there's these videos of these children cycling in Portland. And I'm not the only one who has cried at these videos. You can see there's thousands of comments who are quite specific about why they've been brought to tears, but it's clearly struck a nerve. We have Sam Balto here today from Bike Bus World. He is the leader of Bike Bus Alameda and Bike Bus Vernon in Portland, Oregon. We've probably seen the videos. They are something to behold, and they've brought a spirit and an interest and an attention to this sport of bike bus, to this group, this fraternity, as Tom called it, that's been really beneficial, that I think brought a really positive regard to this. And we're really lucky to have you here today, to have you speak to us, and I think to have you in those moments of the internet when we can scroll past the bits that bring despair and go back to the rhubarb, go back to the bike bus. I love rhubarb, I don't apologize. And find that joy that connects us with people all around the world. So, Sam, come on up. Thank you so much for coming.
All right, Rob did this a bunch of times, but indulge me one more time. When I say bike, you say bus. Bike.
Bus.
Bike.
Bus.
To be clear, I copied that from Sam.
Hey.
The only thing that I started. All right. It's an honor to be here today, not just as a speaker, but as a fellow rider. A rider who believes in the magic in the morning bike bell, the rhythm of rolling wheels, and the growing revolution we're all a part of. To Rob and the entire team, thank you for hosting this incredible summit. Bike Bus 13. This was not just Rob, absolutely. And to each and every one of you in this room, wow, what a sight, what a feeling. Look around. This room is filled with change makers, dreamers, doers, and believers. Whether you're a parent who started a bike bus on your own with just a couple neighbors, a teacher rallying your school, community, or a mayor fighting for safer streets, we are making history. 3 years ago next week, I started a bike bus at my school for Earth Day. At the time, I thought we were just helping kids get to school, but afterwards I realized we were part of something much bigger. We weren't just moving bodies, we were building a new kind of future, a new kind of story. I want to ask a question. What kind of world are we building? One bike ride at a time. We know the stats. We've seen the trends. Children independence is shrinking, traffic around schools is growing, air quality is suffering, and kids who once zipped freely through neighborhoods are now increasingly buckled into back seats. But we also know something more powerful. This story can be rewritten, and we're the ones holding the pen. A bike bus isn't just a group ride to school. It's joy on two wheels. It's community. It's resistance to the idea that school travel must be sedentary, solitary, or stressful. It's what happens when we decide that the way things have been isn't the way things have to be. When we ride together, we're reimagining our communities. Our streets belong to children too. We can create infrastructure inspired by imagination. We can reclaim public space, not just with protest signs, but with pedals. We can change what childhood feels like. We're saying to kids, you are powerful. You can move your bodies. You can lead. You can be part of something bigger than yourself. And we've seen it. That one quiet kid now leading from the front of the bike bus, waving like royalty. I had to make it royalty because this is the UK. That hesitant principal now asking when the next ride is. That city official who once said no, now asking how they can help. Change doesn't come from the top, it comes from the streets. It comes from us. There's no boss of the bike bus. 2 years ago, I started a bike bus to my son's school. Towards the end of the year, we were riding to the start of the ride. Lev looks at me and he goes, Dad, who's the boss of the bike bus? And I go, what do you mean? He goes, who told you to start a bike bus at my school? I was like, that's a really great question, buddy. I said, nobody told me to start a bike bus at my school. I just thought it'd be something positive and special for you and your friends and a great, fun way to get to school. And he goes, thanks, Dad. I love the bike bus. There's no boss of the bike bus. You don't need permission to make your community better. Just do it. We are having real impact. Yes, we're reducing emissions. Yes, we're increasing activity levels. But more than that, we're creating a new culture of arrival. What does it mean to ride to school on a bike? It means you're awake, alert, smiling. You've had a connection. You felt the wind in your face and your feet on the pedals. You started your day in motion with freedom, not frustration. And that matters. It matters more than we can measure. You are not alone. Let's be honest, it's not always easy. Sometimes you feel like you're the only one who sees the vision. Like you're pedaling uphill, literally and metaphorically. But look around. You are not alone. From Portugal to Perth, Mexico City to Minneapolis, we are part of a global movement that's rooting for each other. Bike buses aren't fringe. They're not a passing trend. They are the future. You are not just starting a bike bus. You are starting a revolution of how we care for our communities, of how we center kids in our decisions, of how we reclaim joy in the everyday. So what's next? We keep showing up. We keep inviting others in. We share our wins and our roadblocks so we can learn together. We advocate for policies that make bike buses safer, easier, and more joyful. And most importantly, we support one another because movements thrive when people feel seen. I'm going to say that one more time and then I'm going to model what that looks like. We support one another because movements thrive when people feel seen. So when I was talking to Rob about the summit and everything, he talked about Al multiple times and what an amazing volunteer he's been, how we couldn't have done this without Al. So I want to recognize Al. This is my teacher self coming in, and I feel like we can spread this, and I want to give it to you all. You can take it if you want. We'd like to do earlier today a whoosh clap for Katie. So a whoosh clap is a way to send positive energy to someone, okay? So you go 1, 2, 3, clap, and then you're like whoosh, throwing a big wave of positive energy towards someone. So I want you to look around the room, see someone that you really want to show support and love for. All right, look around, maybe, could be anybody. And then if you feel that good energy, you're going to go. All right. So we go 1, 2, 3, clap, and then we go. All right, ready? That was practice. That was practice. 1, 2, 3. Let this summit be a spark. Let it be the moment you remember just how powerful you are. This is a chance I say, man, my teacher song is really coming in. I'm giving all the goodies. This is a chance I say right before we start riding. If you're ready, say, we ready?
We ready?
There we go. Let's keep showing up. Let's keep growing the ride. Let's keep dreaming of cities where it's not brave to ride bikes to school. It's just normal. Because the world we're building, it's not only safer, it's not only cleaner, it's more joyful, more connected, more human. And it all starts with the first pedal stroke. Thank you for being here. Thank you for riding. Let's keep pedaling towards possibility together.
Thank you so much. I think what this encapsulated so much is that we're moving around with all these bits about joy, about community, but we're also talking about building something. And building something is done by people, but building something also needs infrastructure. And it's thanks. And I think what we've got in maths is people, but I think what we sometimes need more in our communities and what we all are asking for is better infrastructure, is more support, and how to create an environment that makes bike bus normal, that makes bike bus not an exception, but that makes bike bus just the most obvious choice. And someone who can talk to us more about that, how we can implement those infrastructure changes, what is needed, where we can ask, who we can ask, is Phil Jones from Phil Jones Associates. So he's an engineering consultant working in the active travel industry, and I think we'll have some points for us to add today. Phil, thank you so much for joining us.
There you go, you're on.
Hey! Okay. Can I just say that this is the hardest act to follow ever? Okay. Not Sam, the kids, I mean, forget that. Yeah, so it was alright. Anyway, so, okay, well, thank you for the introduction. So, yeah, that's what I do. PJA, stands for Phil Jones Associates. So, I've got some current and former employees here, which I'm really pleased to say, which is great. I'll talk about it. Yeah, as said, what we really want. It shouldn't be exceptional, should it? It shouldn't take this much effort to let kids ride to school, but that's kind of where we are. I've never done bike bus before January. So Will Tomney reached out to me and Rob asked me to come today, and there's me riding in January, and it was absolute joy, I have to say. It was such fun, and I had such fun this morning. And what I've been thinking about is, okay, so what's the connection between this and all the stuff that you're doing, and the changes that we want to see in the physical world? So, it's what we do. Sorry, if you can see, I mean, these, boring old drawings, engineering drawings of cycle routes when we get allowed to do it. That's what we do. And we, do nice visualizations and when it this, stuff that gets built and things that actually do get built of this scheme in London of a nice route through Parkland Drive, and visualisations of things like filtering. You know, wouldn't it be nice if we could actually reduce the traffic on some of our quiet streets by filtering and creating pedal cycle zones. And sometimes we do it, and this is in King's Heath that went in during COVID. You know, it looks pretty unattractive, but it's been really effective in reducing through traffic in this part of Birmingham. And you know, I've been involved in writing lots of the guidance that we now use to plan the infrastructure. So I won't go into any of this, but if anybody wants to call me after and ask me, you know, about the width of a cycle lane or how to do a cyclist junction or whatever, I'm very happy to talk about more and stuff like that. But that's kind of not what I want to talk about, because we kind of know what to do. You know, I was saying to Sarah, I first got involved in the whole cycle infrastructure world back in about 2009, when there was a massive debate going on in London between the segregationists, as they were called at that time, and the vehicular cyclists. You know, there were some people who said, yeah, but we were here first, we should have the roads, we shouldn't need all this cycle infrastructure, we claim it. And then other people were saying, yeah, but you know, the Dutch have been building cycle infrastructure for 50 years, and they've got cycle levels that far exceed that. Don't you think we could learn something from that? And there was the London Cycle Campaign and the Love London Go Dutch campaign. And the segregationists won out. They won the day. And I think, you know, we all know now that debate has ended. The idea that we can train people to cycle with goods vehicles and then we'll get mass cycling that way. That's not going to happen. We need this. We all know we need this. So it's pretty clear. The problem is, how do we, and then this, I don't know who the we is. The we is kind of global we. How do we get consent to do that? Yeah, how do we do that? So these photographs, and it came from Uncle John Little, who worked in Waltham Forest, one of the mini Hollands in London, if you know about that. So Waltham Forest used to be a watchword for really bad. I mean, there were books published, crap cycle lanes in Waltham Forest, if you ever heard of those. And now it's a kind of poster child for out of London of doing things really well. And a lot of it is down to John Little, Bespoke Consulting, who was the lead behind that. And over here you've got people who are complaining. Basically, they filtered great chunks of outer London, sort of Edwardian suburbs, and businesses were in there, and they were complaining. These people, you can make it out. They carry a coffin, and the coffin is a funeral for their business, because they said that the mini Holland scheme would kill their business. And over here, you've got people who are shouting, "This is great. We live in the next door neighbourhood. Come on, finish the job. You know, we want this too." So this kind of big dichotomy, and we saw this massively during the pandemic when low traffic neighbourhoods, bollards, filtering went in very quickly, like in King's Heath, in response to the government's emergency. And you know, these people want it, and these people kind of don't. And that conflict is really, well, it certainly attracts a lot of attention in the media, because the media love conflict, and we get this kind of polarisation of debate, and in a way it's not helpful. So how do we break out of that? Well, if we're lucky, and it's great to have your MP here. I hope the MP is kind of you know, one of these people. We have some politicians who are prepared to lead, and here's Ken Livingstone, who's the Mayor of London up to 2008, just before that period when the whole cycle debate started. And he brought in the London congestion charge. And unlike Manchester and Edinburgh, he didn't have a referendum. He didn't ask the public, do you want to be charged to drive on the roads? Because he kind of knew what the answer would be. And the answer is easy. You can make up the two dots. These were press reports. So 50% of people were opposed, before it happened, 50% of people were opposed to the congestion charge. If you had a referendum then, it would have gone down. Just before implementation, people were kind of warming to the idea it was close to 50-50, but again, it would, and I still remember the massive press reports. The press were on the edge of the congestion charge zone, waiting for all these traffic jams to appear, because people couldn't drive through central London. And guess what? They didn't appear, and they all packed up the cameras and went home. And immediately afterwards, oh, this is great. You know, actually, there's less traffic in central London, and the thing flipped over. And then by 2006, massively in favour. But if you if you had a referendum today, who in London would vote to take away the congestion charge and have more cars in the centre of London? But if they'd asked them before, you would have got the answer, don't do it. You know, so there is a problem when sometimes politicians listen too much to the public, or listen to what they think the public opinion is. And this guy, Phil Goodwin, who's a professor of transport, wrote about this, and a lot of us call this the Goodwin curve. And it basically, you've got this great idea down here, and we increase support. It's a new idea, not just for him. Increase support for the general idea, get sufficient support for it to go ahead. And then as the detail emerges, and who the losers might be about this change, then the opposition comes out, and you get this panic just before implementation. And this happened in Cambridge. So Cambridge was going to do road pricing, and they got up here, and the detail, and then and they voted against it, and never happened. Now, Ken Livingstone didn't do that. Well, one of the things we've got to do to our politicians is tell them this is not a bug, this is a feature. Every time you do something, this is what will happen. And you will become really unpopular when you do this. So be prepared for it. Because when it happens and the benefits emerge, actually you will become more popular. And this follows the academic, this is actually happened, this is Stockholm congestion charging, you know, and referendums, would you vote referendum, yes in a referendum, it came in after it came in, it's cool. So people, people don't know what the future's going to be like, you know, so they're scared of change. But also we have this problem where we overestimate public opposition to taking space away from cars and giving it to walking and cycling. So this is some research that was done by the Department of Transport, I think in 2019. Support for the reduction of road traffic. 29% strongly support, 49% tend to support. So the people who support reduction in road traffic are in the vast majority, okay? And the support for the reallocation of road space for walking and cycling, again, about 80% are in favour of that. And this is government statistic. This is not fiddled in any way. This is what the government, you know. But if I was to ask you, do you support reallocation for road space for walking and cycling? You would all say, yeah. Now, but if I was to ask you, do you think most people would agree with you? What would you say?
No.
No. And you're wrong. And you're wrong. And that is a thing which I'll say the words now because it's hard to say. Pluralistic ignorance. Okay? So that's what that is, and it's really important. And here's another example. I worked on the Welsh 20 miles an hour project. So this is would you support a speed limit of 20 miles an hour near which you live? Yes, no, you know, massively in favour, about 2/3 in favour of support. That's I mean, again, as the detail emerged, we know in Wales it became less popular. But in principle, people were very supportive of it. When people were being consulted, these people in Ceredigion, this guy was saying 300 people objected to the speed limit changes. That's 300 out of a population of, I don't know, 100,000. These people said, sorry, you can't read it. This equates to 99.5% of Ceredigion agreeing they are against the introduction of 20 miles an hour. No, they're not. They're not. 99.5% don't agree with you, but you think they agree with you. So we've got this massive mismatch between what the public really think and what we, the public, and crucially our politicians, think they think. Okay? And that is pluralistic ignorance. So it's the phenomenon where people mistakenly believe that everyone else holds a different opinion from their own. And we have to crack that. We have to hold a more truthful mirror to society and say, this is what you think. And what we are doing, you agree with it, you know? Because social media amplifies dissent, and we get a very skewed, decision makers get a very skewed view of what the public think from social media. Because then this is what happens. I'm not sure what to think, so I'll just mimic everyone else. So if you get the impression that everyone's against this stuff, you will become against it as well. You will influence your behaviour, and we see that falling off of support. So we've got to really think carefully about that. And it's the emperor's new clothes. That's what it is. Everyone can see the emperor's naked. but because they all thought everyone else could see the emperor was clothed, they didn't believe their own eyes, you know, which is a scary thing when you think about it. It's kind of a bit Orwellian, isn't it, in a way? So that's the thing, what it does, it suppresses the majority from speaking out in favour of the things we want to see, and the crucial thing, it causes decision makers, the people we need to influence to get the changes we all want to see, it causes them to overestimate opposition. So that's why it's so important. Anyway, back to what does this all have to do with Bibles? I can hear you thinking. So, I think you are, I know you're campaigners in a sense, and I know Bibles is a campaign organisation, but I think what you have here, in the chat to Sarah, I think you have an incredibly powerful campaigning vehicle. If you choose to use it, it is the most powerful thing I think I've ever seen. And I think we need to think about, I'm not a campaigner, but I kind of watch campaigns. I think about how, campaigners are here to influence the system, about how these decisions are made. So I think about kind of three components. It's more complex than that, like any more simplification. But the three parts of the kind of decision-making system. You've got the public, and I think they've got kind of latent demand for active travel, walking and cycling. We know people want it. And they vote, and they've got opinions, and in democracy that matters. And they vote for politicians. And they provide the investment, and they crucially provide the decisions, but do they provide the leadership? Are they like Ken Livingstone, who said, whatever I know this is right, we're going to do this? Or do they only do what they think is going to get them re-elected as popular? And probably, sadly, we've got more politicians in the second category than the first, I think. And then over here we've got people like me, the professionals, the people inside, the officers of Worcestershire County Council, who also might be lobbying your efforts to get better infrastructure out there. And it's like, they advise these people, or maybe they're told what to do by these people. And if they do deliver better conditions, you'll see very cleverly the word latent has disappeared now. Because we've now delivered these better conditions, and that latent demand for more cycling is actually being realised on the ground. So the question, I guess, is, I think campaigners have historically maybe focused on this blob. If only the council would do better. And maybe people like me, quite rightly, who did not do very, very good infrastructure in the past. But actually, I think, for the most part, this is your target. And actually, the great thing is that the public don't really care. It's this bootstrapping problem, isn't it? People who don't cycle, and you say to them, we're going to give you great cycling infrastructure, they say, well, I don't care about that because I don't cycle. But do you want your kids to have independent lives? Do you want to breathe cleaner air? Do you want to have quieter streets? Do you want to know your neighbours? Those things, they do matter. And demonstrating how what you're doing creates the kind of conditions they want to live, then they'll want it, and then they'll influence these people. And the kind of whole thing about the pluralistic ignorance thing, still like to say, you've got to then show that when those people really do say that, these people hear it and don't mistake that for the message they're getting from Facebook. Okay, and so that's it really. So I think this is so powerful. Who can argue with him? So I think you have a fantastic movement. I think it's something we're really proud of, and I think it's how, if you want to, you can harness that to do other things and make real change in the world. So thank you.
Because I think we all sometimes think, oh, it's us in this room against the world. But actually, pluralistic ignorance, a term I've learned about today, but I will use a lot, probably overuse for the next 2 weeks. Totally, it's us with the world. And that's so much nicer. So thank you so much for that perspective. And it's especially nice having our city council and MPs in the front row. It's so hard to say. It's like it was written for you. But for all of us, Thank you so much. Our final speaker for the day, before we go into a question and answer session, is Sarah Mitchell. She's the Chief Executive of Cycling UK. Again, sharing that joy of cycling with all of us, sharing that enthusiasm at a very high level with all of us. And she's going to close us out. And then if you're thinking about percolate those questions, we're going to have all of our speakers on the stage and we're going to have a discussion afterwards. Sarah, thank you.
Hi everybody, I'm Sarah. We are campaigners at Cycling UK. We make no apologies for it, so definitely going to talk about campaigning today. And on the subject of pluralistic ignorance, actually, just as an aside to Phil's point, I don't want to call Tom and his compatriots pluralistically ignorant, but we just had some early polling from Savanta which shows that actually politicians share this misconception that they themselves are often very positive about cycling and walking, but actually they think their constituents and other politicians aren't. So that, I think, is really interesting. So, I'm from Cycling UK. We are a charity. We are almost 147 years old, so we're pretty ancient, but we do lots of stuff that's really relevant for you today. So we have we have a massive membership of about 70,000 people across the whole of the UK who really care about cycling and want to see change and brilliant cycling for everybody. But we also work with over 100,000 people every year to get them back cycling or to get them started on cycling as adults when they've never cycled before. And that's in some of the most disadvantaged communities across the UK. So we're really trying to break through those stereotypes about cycling. But the thing I really want to talk more about with you today is campaigning. So we have campaigning running through our DNA at Cycling UK. We have been campaigning for cycling from the start, and it's a really crucial part of what we do today across all 4 nations of the UK. So we have lots of work with local groups, like you guys here, many of your other groups across the whole of the UK. We support something called the Cycling Advocacy Network. If you're not part of it already, you absolutely should join. We bring together cycling campaigners from all 4 nations of the UK, give them tips, advice, support their campaigns. And in addition to that, we take cycling campaigns to all of the 4 governments across the UK to make sure we see the changes we need at a national level, which is obviously crucial for all of you too. So why do we campaign? Yes, great. So we campaign because we genuinely believe that cycling is really brilliant and it has benefits for everybody. And crucially, not just for the people who cycle, but for all of us, even those who don't cycle and who will never cycle, because it gives us all happier, note the theme of joy, healthier and greener lives through what we do in cycling. And we recognise that there are lots of people who see themselves as campaigners, but what we do through our campaigning work is we also try and activate some of those people who may be campaigning, but perhaps don't even yet realise that they're campaigners. They may not see themselves as campaigners. And we see this quite a lot. People who don't think they're campaigning, but suddenly they wake up one morning and realise that the activity that they're doing, lobbying about something that they need for themselves and their families, that makes them campaigners. And community-based campaigners are some of the most powerful campaigners we have. And in fact, Duncan here, our head of campaigns, who some of you probably met in the workshop with Sophie yesterday, he told me his story about starting up as a campaigner without even realising, Duncan, that he'd started campaigning. And Duncan now is pretty well known as a campaigner across the whole of the UK. So take heart from that. So I'm just going to go on to talk about bike buses as a campaigning tool. So I know that all of you will recognise the benefit of bike buses in getting kids to school safely, in a really healthy way. It has all of those sort of utilitarian benefits, if you like. But bike buses, in addition to that, and all of these great benefits here, are a fantastic campaigning tool, as we've talked about a little bit today already. And the crucial element in that is the fun that they bring. And I think that's something that we in the cycling community perhaps don't talk about as much as we could do. But the fun is crucial in a world that's pretty negative at the moment, let's face it. But we see a lot of people that are involved in cycling campaigning who get quite angry, they get quite fed up, and sometimes the cycle campaign group maybe isn't that enticing to other people to join. So I know myself that perhaps sometimes some of our cycle campaign groups, they may be at fault for, they're often be a little bit male dominated, and certainly something that I've noticed from the student executive of a cycling charity as a woman, but also it can tend to get a little bit bogged down in talking about maybe some of the technical detail, design standards. Phil, I know design standards are really important, they're not everybody's cup of tea, and if you don't know what all of those are, it can sometimes be a little bit off-putting when you go along to those campaign group meetings, and that's the real subject in question. So I think moving away from some of that more traditional campaigning model, you can think about bike buses as a different kind of campaigning. And I think fundamentally, if campaigning isn't fun, I don't want to do it. I think all of you in the room are here because you're volunteers. And volunteers do something actually because it's fun. We don't want to make it a chore. We believe in this, we think it's really important, we want to inspire people. And I think that's one of the fantastic things about bike buses. I think you have to be a pretty grumpy person not to feel inspired by seeing a bike bus, the whistles, the noise, the colour, the joy, the sense of community. I think somebody once described them to me as the entry-level drug for cycle campaigning. I think that's a great term. I use that myself. And I think sometimes there can be concerns that by having bike buses, as Phil said, you're kind of falling on one stage of the argument. You're sort of saying, well, if we have bike buses, we're sort of accepting that infrastructure is never going to change and things are never going to be any better. But I really don't think that's true, because I think going back to what Phil said with his different three bubbles, bike buses can really start to change the attitudes of the people, which can change the views of the politicians, which can bring about the kind of infrastructure change that we want to see too. So I think we should take some inspiration from that and what bike buses show that we can actually do together. And I think here at Bike Worcester, we've really seen that change. And I think that the Bike Worcester people have managed to change not just how we think about cycling, but how we see cycling day to day on the streets in Worcester. So that was all I had to say. So thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I think my husband always says cycling with our daughter turned us into a radical. And I think many of us share that experience, that we're sort of accidental activists. We're now going to have all of our speakers up on those scrolls on the most English for all of our foreign contingent. The most English you could get. Here they are. Cars with the bears are optional.
Danny, will you be able to put screw one of those onto there? And I'll face this forward.
Okay, Alfred, you have a question? You have one.
Thank you, Rob. And have you got that? Will you do that one as well? Thank you very much. I'm going to pass them to them so that at least we've got nice ones. Yeah, so you can kind of get them close or around each other.
There's 2 mics there for the live stream. Just have them on your lap. Okay, cool.
Can I just say that I've lost my normal spectacles? I don't normally wear sunglasses.
Yeah, very cool, Rob, very cool.
To say that, I said it to tell all people.
I'm sure that's not true.
I mean, I've been wearing
the bike bearer at 2 a.m. South Devon, and Phil Jones made a fantastic point that vehicular cycling, that argument is gone. Unfortunately, I don't feel that that is the belief of politicians that I have come across, decision makers. And that has been the decision that's been made locally, which probably reflects the fact that they're maybe male and have cycled in the past, having been
Yeah, it's like, what, does this work? No.
That one.
This one. Yeah, no, it's really hard, isn't it? It is. I mean, we have, a lot of our politicians, particularly local level, are quite unrepresentative of their communities in terms of maybe age and gender and ethnicity and that kind of thing. And it is a real problem. I mean, you can obviously it depends on you can try the kind of numbers route. I remember, I don't know if you know Danny Williams, who he's been kind of elevated now, but he was the chief exec of Active Travel England. I saw him speak at a conference once, and he said, as soon as we talk numbers, people fall asleep, which I thought was quite interesting. If you can give masses of stats to people of well, if you do this, it'll be this, and here's all the evidence, and they say, well, that doesn't square with my beliefs, so that the evidence must be wrong, and that's what people say. But I think, and that's certainly the public, I think you have to appeal to more emotions with the public. But I think with politicians, you can at least try, maybe you've tried already, there's nowhere in the world that has achieved mass cycling without infrastructure. That's the truth. Anywhere that you go to has had that. One of my kind of entries into the cycle infrastructure world was we were paid by Transport for London in about 2012. It was a fantastic gig. We went to lots of different countries and studied their cycle infrastructure and see what change was happening. One of the places I went to was New York. It was great. And they were rolling out cycle infrastructure very, very quickly, just with poles and planters and paint, just to claim the space and protect the space. And then they saw this uptick, and places like Seville. So there's lots of evidence to show that if you really do want to get people on bikes, and the vast majority of people are not prepared to be a vehicular cyclist, then you need that protection. But if there weren't this evidence, I don't know. I mean, it's really difficult. Whether you can take them to other places, maybe getting to meet other politicians who've been on that journey themselves. I think sometimes we like to listen to our own peers. So maybe that's an idea. But yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, I think those are really good suggestions, actually, Phil. And I think when we think about it, we think about both campaigning for better infrastructure and also for better road safety. So I think the two things are linked, because in some areas it's just going to take a long time, or it's never going to be possible to have that infrastructure alongside the roads. So it's different in different areas. But I guess to your point about how do you persuade those politicians to take a different point of view, I think this is where the diversity of campaigners really comes in, because I think often politicians expect to see the usual suspects lobbying them about cycling, and I think this is one of the huge benefits that all of you have. You're younger, you're more diverse, you're different from the usual cycling campaigners. Now, that's not to do down existing cycling campaigners who are brilliant and have achieved a lot, but they will be bolstered and they will benefit from having more diverse voices in the room, because I think that politicians will then think the greater diversity of people, the plurality of people in that community really care about this. And I suppose just a final point to add is that women in particular are put off cycling because of their perceptions of safety around cycling, and some of those are founded and some of those are unfounded. But I think it's really important for politicians to understand that they're particularly disadvantaging women by not providing safe infrastructure. And we have a really big campaign at the moment around women's safety and infrastructure, so I would encourage you all to sign up and support that, because we're really trying to get a groundswell of support behind that as a kind of way in to win some of these infrastructure arguments in a slightly different way.
Yeah, a couple things. If we do nothing and we just ride our bikes and occasionally share videos and invite people to come join, we're going to move the needle more than we could ever imagine. And so I think the name of the game is longevity and finding sustainability in this. And no matter where you are, no matter how awesome, my bike bus is or whatever, we still have those same issues in Portland. So it's never really going to go away, but it's about changing the hearts and minds of people and inviting them in. Maybe that individual had a bad experience, and I think a lot of times we don't really like being vulnerable. And it's much easier to just be like, oh, people don't like riding bikes, and it's easier to drive. But invite them, ask them why they don't ride on non-bike bus days, and I think that's a great thing to kind of show. Like, look at this latent demand. I think that's an amazing term that we use a lot in Portland. Like, this demand, we're not magic people, you know, we just invite people to come join and all these people show up because there's this demand and we create the social infrastructure and now we need the government to come in to create the physical infrastructure. And so it's this symbiotic relationship.
I have nothing to add.
Yeah.
Thank you. This is not for Roya. Hi, I'm Hannah Cooper, Cycling UK. One of Cycling UK, so I'm kind of voting in cycling this year. And I'm a city councillor. Here at Liverpool. I wonder, Hannah, I'm not doing John Archibald there, what your experience of cycling in Worcester is, please. Thank you.
How's it in cycling?
Well, with the bike bus, actually, fantastic. Yeah. No, I haven't cycled a lot in Worcester. I mean, I have done a few kind of long rides coming on Sussex, but I suppose as a city, it's much like many UK cities, isn't it, that hasn't really taken the opportunity, but all the potential is there. It's not particularly hilly, it's relatively compact, so it could be great, but it could be better.
Yeah, I feel like it takes me a while to process. Hamish was asking me how the Cardiff bike bus was, and I'm like, there's so much to take in, and I'm watching all the different movements that happen, you know, in terms of marshalling. In terms of Worcester, I mean, like, this is a 15-minute city. I'm like, how do we, in a hotel, and a venue, and a bike bus, where there's schools, and then in this place, and it's all within a 5-minute walk. So it's there. You know, it's super narrow, but we're not going to demolish neighborhoods to make it easier for people to drive, so let's make it easier for people to walk and ride bikes.
It should be a 15-minute city, but you shouldn't have dual carriageways going through 15-minute city. There's loads of potential in Worcester. I mean, there are some potentially beautiful joined-up cycling routes right in the centre. There's no reason why people should have to drive through the centre of Worcester. It just seems ripe for change to me. It just seems disappointing that we haven't got that, because we've got potentially lovely cycle routes relatively flat by the canal, by the river, and the roads kind of ruin it, and there's no cycle parking. So, sorry Worcester, I love Worcester, but I just want it to be a little bit better.
Sorry, I'm going to just make a point. Since this happened in Worcester, I'll sort of bring it up. So recently you all did like a tweet that was kind of a little political about the safety in riding.
Doesn't sound like us.
And I think it's this thing where it's a very interesting question. Like, bike bus, you could just focus on the joy, and you know, there's research from Glasgow about how they look at drivers' perspective of when a bike bus passes and they understand and they see the value of a bike bus and the need for safer infrastructure. So sometimes, like, you don't need to be direct about it. You can be like subversive and go around and just be, I call it the Valley Girl effect, and be like, oh my gosh, wouldn't it be amazing if it was safe infrastructure? Oh no, silly me. But you can just kind of take that view, and I think sometimes people who might be interested in starting or joining a bike bus, but then they see it like as this tenuous thing, will step away. And I think we really want to be careful about just keeping it joyful, keeping it positive. I mean, I'll post something, and if I see that the comments or people are just taking it the wrong way, I'll just delete the post and, you know, present it in a different way. And I think that's really important, that like, you don't need to make this the political thing. This is a functional trip to school that stands on its own, and that alone is going to move the needle more than we will ever imagine.
not you're just, you're not doing what you should be, versus, how can I possibly get my kids to school without the car? And, the whole of the economy of the city centre will fall apart if you can't drive in the car. How do I manage those voices, and how can we respond effectively?
It's really hard, isn't it? It's really hard. And I think social media has been a really, it promised so much, didn't it? But it's been actually, I think, a very damaging thing in some ways, the kind of public discourse. And we receive this very I nearly put a slide in, but I took it out. Social media makes its money through controversy. That's, they make their money through clicks, and they drive clicks through controversy. So the social media is there to actually create disagreement. It's not there to create agreement. So we have to treat it really carefully. And it concerns me, I guess, that a lot of politicians look at what the comments are on Facebook and take that as a representative of reality, and it is not. You'd be better off just logging off completely. It's hard, I guess. I mean, some authorities have actually gone to the trouble, and it's not that expensive, of commissioning properly balanced representative market research. I showed that those Kantar graphs that Department of Transport. Kantar are a market research company. They'll tell you what people think about the price of baked beans or whatever it is. Maybe we just need to do some proper study of public opinion and get a really truthful. Because otherwise, I feel for you. You're just a victim of all these voices and you don't know how. They're just very loud and very persistent, but are they representing a big constituency or just a well-funded campaign or what? So somehow we need to kind of cut through that and sort of hold up a mirror and say, well, what do people really think? I'll just say we've been doing some work in Shrewsbury recently. I say recently, over the last few years. And we've managed, and I don't know if anyone wants to hear from Shrewsbury. I think Rob, you went to Shrewsbury.
It's brilliant.
Yeah. And they've just published the Shrewsbury Moves Big Town Plan, or their transport plan, which is basically going to put a big traffic filter on the town centre. You will no longer be able to drive across Shrewsbury Town Centre, and it's been passed. It hasn't happened yet. And then on the back of that, lots of bus priority and cycle infrastructure, all the rest of it. So really taking a kind of very pro-alternative. And how did they do that? They did that by over a long period of time, speaking very carefully to the constituents and the population of Shrewsbury, asking what kind of town do you want? And the message came back very clearly: we want a town with less cars in it. We want a town centre with less cars in it. We want better air quality. We want all these things. So okay, and then they published that in a big town plan, and then we were commissioned to produce a transport strategy that said, okay, we're not telling you what the transport strategy is going to deliver because you've already decided that, but this is the mechanism by which you can get what you want. And so I don't know. It's a long process, but I think it's a matter of engagement.
Sorry,
go on.
There might be a touch of pluralist state of ignorance there for you, because if you're referring to White Worcester as a loud voice that's saying everybody's got a cycle, no cars anywhere, that's not our position. Well, it's not my position. I don't think it's the position of the White Worcester team. We are here to encourage cycling for people that can, and Sarah mentioned benefits of people who don't or can't cycle. Get benefits from more people cycling. So that's not our position as a group. The point that I would make is that we, as a group in the city, will support any politician with a vision for their local area. You're elected officials. You can decide what you want Cathedral Ward to look like. In your own head, you can articulate that. You can ask us for help, and we will help you bring that vision to life. And we will help you build public support to deliver it. We don't have that in huge swathes in Worcester or Worcestershire at the moment. Nobody's articulating that vision because, to Phil's point, everybody's got their heads below the parapet slightly and doesn't want to talk about closing a lane of traffic on the dual carriageway through past the cathedral. They don't want to talk about installing the modal filter. If you are an elected official, you could articulate that vision of what you want your ward or your division to look like. And if that is a pro-walking and pro-cycling vision, we get behind that, all of us would. So in terms of whose voice to listen to yours. You're an expert, you know your local area, you know how people move. and you can articulate a pro-walking and pro-cycling vision that we as a community will support. So don't listen to anybody but yourself. Do that, so. Anyone else want to comment on that? Go on, Sarah.
Thanks. I just wanted to say thank you to Lynn for being a politician, because I think it's a really hard job.
Yeah,
and really appreciate you putting yourself forward for public office, because not enough good people do, and we need good people to be in public office and to come along to events like this, and you're listening to your constituents and other people, and that's the best that you can do. And I think it's a real challenge, because you obviously hear the loud voices more than you hear the majority. But there is good polling, as I think Phil's DFT slide shows, which shows broadly, yes, not on a constituency by constituency level, but broadly there is broad public support for cycling. The difficulty is it's not necessarily vocal and it's not necessarily activated. And I think that's where we can help as cycle campaigners, to try and get those people to be more publicly supportive of initiatives to support the politicians. And I guess from your point of view, yes, I guess some of it does take a bit of political risk in leadership to kind of push for these changes, but I think you should take some comfort from the fact that after the event, when those things have been changed, people don't want to go back, as Phil showed. And the way that we tend to try and talk about it is offering people choice, so not saying to people, everybody, you have to get on your bike, but broadly to say, we want to provide safe enough roads and infrastructure for people to have the choice to get on their bike, or to walk, or to use their car if they need to. And it's that choice, I think, is the thing that can win over a broader group of constituents.
Yeah, I don't think I'm not a politician, but it doesn't seem like a very hard job. It's probably like being a teacher, and you just have to do your job, and you have a vision. And as a PE teacher, I could just accept that the 10 boys who are really good at basketball, who want to play full court, can dominate the entire gym, while the rest of the 15 other kids have to play around the periphery. Or I have, do my job and have the courage to say, no, we're going to organize this space so that everybody can be successful and everybody can learn and everybody can thrive. And that's what we need to be doing as politicians, creating an environment where everyone can be successful. And courage shouldn't come from the children only. I think that's one thing. And then also, we live in reality. We're not, we've seen in America and in Europe, what happens when you demolish neighborhoods for highways. We're clearly not doing that again. Nobody's going to volunteer their house to be demolished. So driving goes up 1% every year, so eventually traffic's going to be so congested that you're going to have to demolish some neighborhoods. That's really expensive. That takes a lot of political will, so it's just much easier to give people choices, and nobody's taking your car away.
And I see just a couple of final thoughts you made. I mean, you talk about loud voices. I think what's really interesting is, and this is the bike bus, gives voice to people that we don't normally hear from, which is children. And children, so, yeah, absolutely. Easy one, that was it. But children don't vote, so they're often ignored. So that's a real shame. But I think that's really, really important. And my other thought was the power of trials. Sometimes, we close this lane, or we put that bollard or whatever, the sky will fall in, we'll have massive congestion. Or maybe let's just try it, and if it doesn't work, we'll take it out. And my kind of Goodwin curve, you have to leave it in long enough to get past the initial, oh, this is awful, and people do adjust their behaviour. I mean, Waltham Forest, the mini Holland there, I remember there's a great quote from somebody who says, yeah, I used to drive my kids to car, and now it takes me longer. I have to walk. Well, yeah, that's kind of the idea, But after a while, people kind of get used to that, and they do change their behaviour. So, so trials is another good way. Well, let's just try it.
Thank you. I have a question from Ronnie.
Well, thank you. First, thanks for Rob and Michael's doing it for a phenomenal few days. So my name is Jordi Honey, and I'm a research professor in Barcelona. And I would like to hear your perspective on what the questions you have about how Bike Bus works, or from your perspective of a cycle advocacy organization or organizer or engineer or designer, and you look at Bike Bus, what questions do you have, or what data are you interested in learning about Bike Bus? And you can give me short answers so that we can
I'd love to see our influence on children cycling as they age out of the bike buses that we run. So, do we have any impact on the children who participate in the bike buses in Worcester? Do we increase their probability of cycling as a teenager? That would be amazing.
I mean, and I know the kind of thing, my fellow professionals would see this and immediately ask questions about road safety, so stats to demonstrate that this is actually a safe means to cycle and get a kids to school, I think would help. There will be some people in my profession who would look and think, oh my goodness, and and think of all those negative thoughts about liability and so on. So having the answers to that would be, and just one other thing, I think, what I'm also struck by is the number of people of my kind of generation who take part in this. I think there's a really kind of maybe an unrealised benefit of bike bus on older people. And have you seen where some old people's homes bring children in, have nurseries inside old people's homes, and both children and the old people benefit? I think the bike bus is a kind of mobile version of that. So wouldn't it be great to kind of see if you can get some quantified benefits on older generation and get the support of the aged and other organisations, and see this as a cross-generational thing.
Yeah, I think that intergenerational point is spot on. We have 2 seniors that volunteer on our bike bus, and they're critical, and my younger son knows Peter's name, and I'm like, I cannot believe this kid knows, that they're like, we're building this connection. I think one of the biggest issues that I'm really seeing is this issue of children's independence and autonomy, and it really is connected to the breakdown of our social fabric of society, and we really don't want to admit how much we have a hard time trusting our neighbors. And it's really, hard to talk about sometimes, but the bike bus is this amazing tool that's resewing this fabric of society and making it so families feel comfortable, parents feel comfortable to be able to give their children independence, which they so desperately need.
Thanks. I agree with all of those points, and I think from Cycling UK's perspective, there are probably 2 areas. One is around perceptions, and the other is around the mechanics. So I think we have an ambition to change public perceptions of cycling, to build positive public perceptions of cycling. And so I guess the data that I'd be really interested in is what is the impact from a baseline of what we think is relatively more negative or sceptical views about cycling being really scary and not very safe. What is the change in the broader population, not just the people taking part in the cycling, but people who see those bike buses in Worcester, in any other city? So that would be of interest to see whether that shifts any perceptions. And then just on the mechanics of bike buses, I would like to know what the secret formula is for Worcester that we could help other cities to formulate. I'm sure Hamish and Westlands would want to know the same answer. So what do we need to know? What are the things that makes this successful that could help us to enable other communities to replicate it in other parts of the 4 nations of the UK?
I got it.
You know it.
I got a step.
Can you tell me
I I think this is important. This is kind of what I like to, as a nonprofit, as government, the amount of work that they're doing, volunteer hours, is in the thousands. I mean, something like a stipend, whatever, 500 pounds, 1,000 pounds, something. It's pennies to the dollar, but it's the start of an acknowledgement to see, we see what you're doing, we see the impact, and it's not what it's totally worth, but we're working on getting there. And I think that's a great scaffolding step to really support this movement all around the country and all around the world.
So we're in an amazing position now as a group because of our scale gives us such a huge flexibility and such an ability to offer any type of cycling provision to families in the city, and it's something that I'm really proud of. If I think about what's the intervention or what's the attitude or a behaviour that I think has contributed most significantly to it, is some combination of myself, Katie, Danny, Als, and a few others. If we get a sniff of a bike bus, if there is, if you move your head in a particular way when we want to start a bike bus, we latch onto that and we do not let go until we've ridden into school with the family. So in the most polite way possible, that's what we've done. And we have been almost autistically focused, I might say, on working with new families in new schools. So that is what has changed our model, and why we've got so many people in the room, and why we've got such an amazing community when it comes to bike buses, is because we are extremely ferocious, evangelical when it comes to how brilliant this is. We all know how brilliant it is, but we're very bold and abrasive, maybe, in terms of like how passionately we want to create these this provision for children and for families. Entry drug is amazing. We love it. It's brilliant, and that's what we've done. And now we've got 10 schools, and it's because we nearly set up a new route this morning. So like as in, but we decided that was not a good idea, so we got other things on. So that's the secret sauce. Is in this session I say Catherine's about asking for help, etc. We just go at it, like we don't take no for an answer. And if you even like looking at Joe and Joyce over there, I know you're Joe. Joe knows this because this is Joe, right? Joe might have mentioned it once to Rosie, and then all of a sudden she's leading the bike bus to her local school. So that's what we do. Sorry, Joe. So yeah, we don't have to apologise for it. I'm just sorry, Hannah, I'm conscious of time, and we've been going for ages, so maybe a couple of questions. We've got the room for an hour, or nearly an hour after this, so you can grab anybody to talk, but I'm just conscious of energy. Children as well, they're doing really well. Well done.
Hello, my name is Gareth, and I'm co-founder of Bike Bus in Glasgow. We've been bike busing for 3.5 years now, and we've seen lots of impacts that are not related to cycling. And I was really struck yesterday in the kids session, and then you guys all got a snapshot of that this morning, that actually probably 90 to 95% of what those kids said this morning was nothing to do with cycling. It was about community, it was about friends, it was about joy. And we're living in a world where you don't see a lot of that. So I'm maybe be slightly provocative and say, bike bus, it's not about cycling, discuss.
Well, maybe cycling about cycling. So, yeah, good. It is sometimes, isn't it? People do events and audaxes and crazy things like that. But actually, for the most part, I mean, for me, when I ride my bike, 99% of it is just to get around, and it's just a great way to get around. And I think, maybe that's what we're doing here is just extending that joy and that ability. And then when you're doing it, you just become a kind of human being and doing human things, by talking to people and having a laugh, so yeah.
I agree. I mean, we used to, as an organisation, talk about cycling and numbers and cycling and the mechanics of cycling. It doesn't really win hearts and minds. And actually, when I think about why I cycle, it's because of freedom and independence and fun and safety and getting around. So lots of practical things. And I think it's really helpful for us when we talk about cycling to not talk about cycling, but to talk about the benefits of cycling. So we talked a lot internally and externally about developing our vision and mission, which of course every organisation has to have. But what really came out was this idea of we want people's lives to be more environmentally friendly. We want people's lives to be healthier and happier. And that's why we settled on our vision, because it's not just about cycling. Cycling is a means to an end, and the reasons that people cycle are not just to cycle, they're for other reasons. So I think if we can talk about cycling through that prism, I think that's more engaging for a much broader audience too.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. I describe Bike Bus as the original Barbie. It's our hopes and dreams and aspirations for our communities. It's the thing that Bike Bus is the thing that goes viral and grabs our attention. But there's lots of different ways of doing that. There's school streets, there's walking school buses, there's play streets, there's kiddo mass rides. And bike buses are just one of the many tools for reconnecting our communities, prioritizing children's mobility, Did I say creating community? You know, all the things that we want, children's independence, all that. But Bike Bus is just like, you know, it's the thing that grabs people's attention because it's fun and joyful and everybody wants those feelings and has some sort of connection with the experience of going to school. But there's no, like I said yesterday, there's no shame in the game if you do a walking school bus, or you can only do a critical mass ride, or you can do school street. That's amazing. And so I think Bike Bus is about meeting people where they're at, helping, you know, start with a walking school bus, then go to a scooter bus, then go to a bike bus. And it's, you know, just helping them be a part of this and, you know, that first step in where they can be successful and then just build up from there.
I didn't hear the question, sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
Go on, Hank.
Bike bus is not bad cycling.
Yeah, I mean, I think I said this yesterday. So, when we talk to the parents that are involved with Bike Bus, and we say, you know, what do you like about Bike Bus? What does Bike Bus mean to you? It's almost funny. It's almost fake. Like 9 out of 10, 99 out of 100, the first word out of their mouth is community. Like I got some messages back. I've got videos or voice messages, and I thought people were joking. I thought everyone's conspired together to get me 10 messages to talk about community, and that is what we thrive on as humans, right? That's what we need, and for me, if it was only the mechanical function of cycling children to school, it wouldn't grow, it wouldn't be sustainable, it wouldn't feel like this, and so it's about community and people and human interactions and meeting children, meeting across age groups, and that support in the playground is really, really important, and Bike Bus is a great model for that, and it's a great tonic for lots of other things going on.
Sorry, one more thing. I think this is one of the most challenging things I experience is, yes, it's not just about bikes, but we do need bike infrastructure, and bike infrastructure is human infrastructure, it's people infrastructure. But it's hard for a lot of people who participate just think it's the community and it's the fun and the joy. And then when it's time to like show up, to speak up about better infrastructure, you're like, how do I present this in a way that's not too strong and stuff like that? And that's just a challenge that I really experienced, and I don't have the answer. And I think, hopefully we'll figure it out one day. What the best approach is,
One more question?
Yeah.
I'm Tom, the community organiser for Cycling Citizens in Milton Keynes, because we know Milton Keynes here. 2009 is here. We have 3 years in a primary school. We've got a Bike Bus and 48 participants. And we've got David who works for the Parks Trust in Milton Keynes, constantly working on cycling there. My question, and I always spoil that up, really, this event has been fantastic for us. Question is about insurance. How best to respond to a head teacher or parent who asks about insurance?
So,
You really had to kill this one.
Yeah. We'll have one more question to not finish.
Yeah, please.
So my line on insurance is you do not need insurance to cycle your child to school. So that's the banging response. I also go, are you asking about insurance because you want to run a bike bus? That also shuts them up. We and I know insurers do this, and we use the Cycling UK cycling group insurance to cover the bike bus as a group ride. So we register parents the day before. As participants, they have charge of their children, so we ask the parents to be accompanied, and there's a lovely document from Cycling UK that will put the fear of any teacher. It's just really elaborate. So that's how we run it. We've been running 3 years now as for bike buses, and we brought in the insurance policy. We formalised that and made sure it was okay with Cycling UK about a year ago. So we've done 1,000 bike buses before we thought about insurance, because you don't need insurance to ride your child to school.
Yeah, the insurance thing, I get asked it all the time, and we don't ask parents to carpool if they have insurance, so I think it's kind of silly. I do, on a big picture thing, I do really worry if we do come up with an answer on insurance, that's really going to hurt the movement, that, we've now put this big barrier that you need to fundraise X amount of money or you have to do X or Y paperwork to be able to have insurance, I think that could really kill the momentum that we're having. So let's not talk about insurance.
Last question.
Okay, hi, my name is Hilary, and we set up the bike bus to our kids' primary school in South Birmingham, and we have a few families on that, but we're kind of, I feel like, I really like to set up like Birmingham and be like Worcester, basically. So, what do we do next? Like simple things that I can do in like non-spare time. How do we? What's the next steps?
I'm a member of push bikes. Okay, do you know push bikes? Okay, so push bikes. Sarah described, or crusty old blokes talking about cycling infrastructure.
Those weren't her exact words.
No, they weren't.
Please don't say that.
I can say that because I am a crusty old bloke talking about cycling infrastructure. But that's what push bikes is, a little bit too much. But then there's Better Streets for Birmingham, which is, you sound like you're in touch with that. I did, talk to both those groups, and I don't know if they're kind of, be officially involved. I think this is great. This is happening here in Worcester, which is not kind of, you immediately think of fertile territory for this, but it's fantastic. Birmingham, if Worcester can do it, South Birmingham can do it. So let's have a chat afterwards, and if I can help make some links and really help that happen, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, I think this is a really important thing. There's always this desire to do more, and it comes from a good place. And also, you are doing enough. You are leading this in your community. That is amazing. And if you just did that, thank you. That's amazing. Now, if you have the desire to do more, there's lots of ways to do that. We can talk about it later. But I just really want people to know, you got 30 kids, you got 10 kids, you got 5 kids, that's amazing. That's a bike bus, you're doing it.
Yeah, that's quite right. And I think if you want to connect with other groups locally or other volunteers, then if you're not already a member of our Cycle Advocacy Network, I would encourage you to join, because we have lots of groups, campaign groups, but also cycling groups in Birmingham, community-based, affiliated groups of ours from all different communities, and I'm sure you're not alone in wanting to do that, so the more we can join people up to support one another, the better.
So I'll make one final comment on Hillary's question, and I'll close proceedings and say thanks to everybody. We have had bike buses in Worcester which have run with one family, so that the parent lead, or maybe two, for sometimes more than a year. And I think Sam said earlier about this campaign which is like flash and bang, and feels really good, and you get loads of energy from it. But there's also just consistency in crushing it. And one of those bike buses that were one family and just did it week in, week out, they're now some of the biggest groups we've got, and their ability to persevere has changed the lives of 10 families in their school, because they were there and did it for a year and didn't get disheartened. So to Sam's point, it's an invitation, not a challenge. If you're there and you're opening space for people and you're welcoming people in consistently, it does grow, it will grow. So that's the most important thing, is to stick with it. And we have a bunch of stuff that we can talk about which we think helps, but yeah, it's super cool. Folks, I'm going to close. Hannah, any final words?
I was going to say, I was going to thank all our speakers. We can maybe give all another hand for answering questions. If you bring this joy, this energy, all these ideas back, you are enough. You do it amazingly, but also bring that joy back to your home. This afternoon we have lots of things. If you're staying in Worcester, there's I think a guide right to Orleans. If you're fancying some actual cycling for cycling. If you have kids, or if you are like me, if you love the treasure trail, there's a treasure trail which there's a leaflet, there's a map, there's presents, prizes. But the
trade itself is the price. If you're someone who wants organized fashion, you want to know more about the British arts, which is only in Europe, which is really cool. Then that's one of the things you'll see on the 5 kilometer stretch. Really recommend it, and really cool to
check out.
Tonight, we're having a big after party, splash party with a DJ, with local apple juice, with lots of dancers, more happy tears from me, and thank you so much for coming to Worcester. Thanks for being part of us, and have a lovely afternoon in the sun in Worcester.
You have borrowed black and white Worcester, and can you let yourself known to Lars, who will show you where to lock it up?